Let's go to China's story, the biggest. The Chinese President Xi Jinping will open the 9th Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit formally on Thursday in Beijing. The Chinese President is expected to urge African leaders in attendance to take on more Chinese goods in exchange for pledges of loans and investments. The 3-yearly forum OKs officially kick off today with a welcome dinner for the 50 African nations in attendance and will close on Friday after negotiations over cooperation documents setting the course of China-Africa relations up until the year 2027. China is ramping up its influence in Africa, looking to upstage the continent's traditional partners, mainly Europe, the United States, and others. Welcome my guest to discuss all of this and more. Professor Ken Ife, a development economist and a public policy analyst, is standing by in our Abuja studios. Great to see you again on the show tonight, Professor. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
A great evening to you. Yes, a dinner has been held tonight in Beijing to welcome 50 African leaders. Are you encouraged at this large gathering of African heads of state in Beijing, looking to secure both public and private investment from China? How do you respond?
Always a pleasure, always a ray of hope when you have our heads of states gather in China, because they go there for one clear purpose. They want to attract investment, and obviously very large investment, to be honest, and which is what distinguishes China from other contenders. China can do $10–20 billion without sweat or anything, and no governance conditions and all that kind of thing. But they have all their weaknesses as well, but that's mainly the big show for them. So they also try to get investment, but also have trade on the back of that investment. So the investment is to go to infrastructure and then on progressive value addition, industrialization based on value addition of our natural and mineral products. So that's the key agenda for African leaders, and they're all on the same page. But I think you are going to find that this particular one wants to deepen that relationship.
So why is China, Professor, pushing its frontiers across Africa even more aggressively? It's done about $30 billion or more already in various lending windows. That's as far back as 2019. But things look to be decelerating. But before we get to that, why is China interested more in Africa right now than ever before?
Well, you know, Africa is the most beautiful bride and is the last continent in terms of development, because we have more room for development. We're only punching at about 15% intra-regional trade compared to Europe, that's over 70%, and the Asians about 60, Americans. So we're far below. And then we are also a huge market for infrastructure, especially on interconnectivity. And we have so much more investment to make in human resource development, in health, in education, and then also on industrialization, because we are the worst of the whole continent in terms of industrialization. Bear in mind that in 1945 and thereabout, Africa was consigned to producer of raw materials, and then predominantly going to Europe for processing, and then we have to fold our hands and wait for them to process them and bring it for us to consume. So that has hampered industrialization by design. And then, of course, infrastructure is quite necessary for you to industrialize. So all of them are music to the ears of China. So China has capitalized on that opportunity and thinks positively of what Africa needs. They also have their Road and Belt project, which is also a global phenomenon, and they want our buy-in into that old continental framework. And then also, they're also now pushing other ones like Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiatives, Global Civilization Initiatives, and they want our buy-in into those. So China has something, agenda for this, and then Africa is just a meeting of minds. But again, there is a backdrop of Cold War changing to something else, and now bipolar, after moving to tripolar, multipolar people. The world is less safe, as it were, and everybody is looking for partnership that can be sustained over a much more difficult period we are facing right now.
So when we look at Africa's development process, had really been dependent on Chinese loans and investment. Even when you look at a number of local African currencies, you find images, and we're going to show a couple of them, which one of my colleagues, Vumbai, was very nice to share with us. Look, so you can see China's footprints across Africa, whether you're talking about road, dam, whatever we're doing, from Egypt to Zambia to Angola, wherever you look in Africa, there's always something that China has built on the continent, and it's all showing on our currencies across the continent, as you can see on the screen. So does this mean, therefore, that when you talk about Africa, it's more of Chinese than otherwise? Is that so?
But that is by design, because China wants to make have a solid footprint on our countries, and that's how they are going about it. That they pick projects, they do them, and then they don't get involved in the politics of. I mean, the politics. There are so many politics around when you are looking around the rest of the globe for major support or loan or whatever. All these governance conditions makes it so difficult. And then you see issues around debt trap. There's so many issues. But China tries to, walk a path, that a much more sustainable path, and have a blueprint and have a good print. For example, those 7 African countries where they have done, friendship currency, some are in notes, some are in coins, but most of them, 7 of them, they're all in notes. And in particular, Guinea and Malawi have actually 2 denominations of notes with China imprint there. But then it's not just writing in China, but actually showing major defining projects that they did in those countries. A lot of them are dams, some are national assemblies, some are universities, very solid investment. And so they have something to show. But of course, that is just one side of the story. There are always 2 sides to every story.
Yeah, there's 2 sides to the story. But China is looking to realign its investment portfolios, I'm sure you know that, away from a bit of a jumbo projects into smaller, nimble projects across Africa or developing countries, to put it that way. What would this mean for Africa? Africa needs mega infrastructure, financing needs. For example, we have a lot of projects. From the Mambila project, for example, in Nigeria is a mega one. We've got other projects that need big money, such as the Jakarta Steel. So we need quite a whole lot of money. We need mega projects across the continent. So now China seems to be decelerating a little bit. Is China telling us something here?
We remember that one of the contentions is that there are accusations that there are some clauses in Chinese contracts that amount to waiver of sovereign immunity. There are also the case that we've just discussed on their imprint on the currencies. And then, some critics will say, wait a minute, we are just talking about Francophone, Anglophone, Lusophone. Are we now going to start talking about China phone or India phone? So there are critics of some of those. But the fact of the matter is that China tends to be driven by profitability and viability of these projects, because that's why they are writing those into those clauses into their contracts. And then, of course, you've seen the Mozambique case, and you've seen some other countries. In fact, even Nigeria. So our presidential planes were seized because Ogun State, played foul, and they're forgetting that federal government guarantees these loans, and then whatever you do will reflect on federal government. So you have all that, those caution. So they may be minded to start rethinking their exposure to big investments and begin to look for smaller ones that are more definitive. And don't forget that their investment framework agreement, or their whatever charter that they enter into with countries, they try to protect themselves. So they invoke all those most favored nation clauses and all these national treatment clauses and seek all those protection, not just for China government projects, but also for the projects of their own country, of their companies. So that's why they had to seize our plane, because they were relying on the protection in the treaty. So So if the mega ones are failing, maybe because as we have a big history of failure of big projects in our country, they may begin to head to smaller ones or even more private sector PPP-driven ones, which have better scope of succeeding and sustainable. Yeah. So it's not unexpected that they may have to start moving that way.
Okay, Professor, let's get to this very important part of the conversation. How would Africa really balance its Western economic policies? I'm not sure China really talk about policies in Africa. It wants trade, it wants investment, it wants money. That's what China, Beijing wants. But basically, we're still implementing Western economic policies agenda. Where is the meeting point or the point of divergence in terms of we need money and trade from China? But here we'll talk about our policies within IMF, World Bank, policies.
Well, what is not that much of policies, to be honest, because China itself has imbibed all those Western policies, but they had a very strong leadership. They have strong political leadership. They have better control. They have better approach to macroeconomic management, and they have better approach to economic leadership than our countries and our continent.
But the IMF, the World Bank, the IMF, respectfully, Professor, the IMF, the World Bank still seem to be dictating things around here, whether it's Nigeria, Kenya, in Ghana, elsewhere. It's still about Western influences in terms of policies, whether it's subsidy, whether it's whatever. Yes. Please go ahead.
The Western influence won't go away. Remember, it won't go away. Remember what I said before. I said we were consigned, by design. We as a country, Nigeria and Africa, we are consigned as producers of raw materials for the West to consume and process and bring to us to consume. So it was a deliberate design by them. And that means that they made us by design an import-dependent economy. And it was in their interest to emasculate our economy and keep dumping things on us, policy inconsistencies, one size fits all kinds of things, and then give you the money. Even though they worry less about how you dispense that, and they worry less about the cost-benefit analysis. So what you see is that our countries and our leaders inexorably drag us into debt trap. And so that is orchestrated. But we are not saying that China doesn't borrow. China does borrow, but they have a different attitude to economic leadership and management and all that. So they control. But now their biggest trading partner used to be United States. United States is causing problem with China right now. And China is having to think twice and begin to find stronger partners elsewhere, because it's no longer going to continue with that tradition of $50 billion and $500 billion deficit we have with America, and all that accusation of $300 billion every year lost on trade secret and intellectual property loss. All of those are now history, because America is no longer taking it as easy as it was. So they now have to look for friends and look for more expand into our thing. And they have the biggest reserves. And they have to invest those reserves in projects that will give them reasonable returns. So they have their motive. And we have our challenges. Our challenges is that we have allowed our economies to be emasculated by those structures of dependency led by the West, and then, of course, accentuated by the Bretton institutions, articulated by them. So we have to fight our way out of this and then do some balancing act between how much we expose to the West.
Yeah, that's my question, because last December, African leaders were in Washington with President Biden for the African Leaders Summit. Everybody had breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever there. And here they are having dinner again in Beijing, meeting with China. So what exactly does Africa want? Who are we in bed with, really, and why?
You have to... look, we could be in bed with everybody, but we have a clear objective.
What's our objective? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Every country in the world is looking for...
Yeah, we're going left, right,
I've told you the objective before.
But I don't... we can't see the result of those... Yes.
The objective is the same. Every country in the world is looking for investment, even America. The only problem is that America, 60% of world trade is denominated in the American dollar. America owes the greatest debt, but America will never pay their debt because it is all denominated in their dollar. They keep printing more dollar. But every country, even China itself, needs investment. What happens is that we are very clear about what kind of investment we need. We need to free ourselves from that bondage of being an import-dependent economy. And for you to do that, you have to add value to your natural and mineral resources. But you do need infrastructure. So you need infrastructure that connects to those. So the nexus is the infrastructure, the nexus between the infrastructure and that is what we need security. So you have security, you have investment in infrastructure, and then of course you need trade. Because you produce all that, you've got to trade them to be able to earn those dollars that you are going to use to balance your books. But then more importantly though, Africa needs to intensify their yuan currency, like Nigerian currency
the swap
trade. We need to get more of the swap. Yes, we need to get more swap, because if our trade volume with China is about $23 billion, and then Africa $28 billion. If we can get that $28 billion on swap, then it will reduce the pressure. About almost 40% of the global, our trade is with China. If we can take that off, and then NMPC getting off this importation of crude, oil will now remove another 40%, then Nigeria would have eventually rested over 70%. Of our exposure to forex, and we can have a more stable forex regime rather than continuing to look for dollar to do business with China. But they are still doing it too. I have to tell you that, even though it seems that the swap has kept quiet, but when ending of last year, I ordered equipment from China, and they told me to go to some local bank and do X transfer. And that's essentially what they are doing. They are doing it, but it needs to be increased to the quantum of our trade volume with China.
Prof, let's sum it up. What should be the takeaways for Nigeria in particular at the Beijing summit? We're seeing press statements from the presidency talking about a number of deals being signed in power sector, a few others. What do you make of that? What do you think that our take-home should be?
No, I think Nigeria is going for a much more strategic and comprehensive bilateral relations with China. And I think it's going to work, because what they are looking at is, although the various facets of it will be sectoral, because there are some clear sectors like digital economy, bioeconomy, and circular economy, all of green economy, and there are some sectors, blue economy, all those sectors. But there are deeper cultural, socio-cultural relationship, educational relationship that they want to make sure that, so that we can weave that strategic relationship into the social and economic fabric of both nations. So Nigeria is headed in the right direction, and we need them. And don't forget that this is not the first time China has actually wanted to embrace Nigeria. I remember sometime when they wanted to actually deal with our power infrastructure and settle it once and for all. But our visiting team didn't give them the opportunity that they wanted. And then of course, they got the oil that they wanted in Niger Republic and all that. But there are many such things. So this is a very positive step to move forward, and then have cultural exchanges, what they call cities and exchange, all kinds of things, both on the cultural, the educational, the economic,
Maybe this is a time we should allow one of the Chinese banks to put their footsteps here in Nigeria, get a banking license and operate from Nigeria. Maybe that will help the yuan swap deal a bit more. Maybe. Maybe we should allow them into the financial services industry. But that's really interesting. It's something we're going to consider for another day. Thank you so much. Professor Ken Ife, we really appreciate your knowledge and experience on this major economic discourse. Thank you so much for tonight. We wish you all the best.